She was tricked into dating a paraplegic billionaire. He said, "Don't stay out of pity." Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The soft hum of the piano filled the luxury ballroom as crystal chandeliers shimmered above polished marble floors. Waiters glided between tables, serving wine that cost more than Elena made in a month. She shouldn't have been there at all, but her friend Mia had begged her to cover for her, saying it was just a harmless charity date, nothing serious. "Please, just go in my place," Mia had said. "He's harmless, and it'll look bad if I don't show up." So Elena put on her thrifted blue dress, borrowed a pair of heels one size too small, and stepped into a world that wasn't hers. The lights felt too bright, the laughter too polished, the air too perfumed. She scanned the crowd nervously until a man in a tailored black suit caught her eye. He sat alone near the edge of the room, his wheelchair positioned slightly away from the table, his hands resting still on the armrest. For a moment, their eyes met. He looked about mid-30s, sharp jawline, hair swept back neatly, the kind of presence that filled the room even in silence. She swallowed her nerves and walked over, clutching her purse like a shield. "Hi," she began softly, forcing a smile. "You must be Adrian." His eyes flicked to her, unreadable. "You're not Mia," he said, his voice calm but distant. Her smile faltered. "Oh, she couldn't make it. I'm just covering for her tonight." He studied her for a long second, then looked away toward the city lights beyond the window. "You don't have to stay," he said flatly, "especially not out of pity." The words hit harder than she expected. "That's not why I'm here," she said quickly, though part of her wasn't sure. He didn't respond, only wheeled slightly back, giving her a polite, empty smile. The orchestra shifted into a slower melody. Around them, couples danced. Elena stood awkwardly, her hands fidgeting. She'd never met anyone who looked so composed, yet so isolated. It was strange, everyone stared at him but spoke to him like porcelain, afraid to say the wrong thing. "Do you always sit out the dances?" she asked gently. His brows lifted. "Do you always talk to strangers out of obligation?" Her cheeks flushed, but she didn't move. "No," she said quietly. "Only when they look like they need company." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, not pity, but surprise. Then, just as quickly, it vanished. "You should go," he murmured. "Enjoy the night. There's nothing here worth staying for." She hesitated, then nodded, stepping back. But as she turned to leave, she heard him exhale softly, as if regret had caught in his throat. Outside the hotel, snow had started to fall, delicate flakes melting against her lashes. She took a breath, trying to shake off the strange ache in her chest. It was just one night, one awkward misunderstanding, and yet she couldn't forget the look in his eyes, proud, lonely, and far too human for a man who supposedly had everything. That night, as she rode the subway home, her phone buzzed with a message from Mia. "How was it? He's that billionaire in the chair, right?" Elena stared at the screen, her reflection flickering in the train window, and whispered to herself, "Yeah, but he's not what people think." Quote. The next morning, the gray light of winter poured through the cracked blinds of Elena's small apartment. Her phone alarm buzzed, muffled under a pile of unpaid bills. She groaned softly and reached for it, her fingers brushing against the sketchbook she always kept by her bed. On the first page, there was still the faint pencil outline of a man's eyes, sharp and distant, the man from last night. She had not meant to draw him, but somehow he had stayed with her. She tied her hair, slipped into her thrift store coat, and hurried out to her shift at the community rehab center where she worked part-time. The place smelled of disinfectant and coffee. She greeted the receptionist and went to check the art therapy room. Inside, patients were painting with trembling hands, each brushstroke a small victory against pain. This job barely paid enough to cover her rent, but she loved it. Here people were not judged by what they had lost, but by what they were rebuilding. Around noon, her supervisor walked in holding a letter. "Elena Brooks?" he called. She turned. "You have a delivery." She frowned, wiping paint off her hands. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, embossed with silver letters. Cole Enterprises. Her stomach flipped. She opened it carefully. Inside was a short note written in neat handwriting. "You forgot this." Folded inside was the napkin she had used at the gala to wipe her nervous hands, and beneath it, a small silver pin shaped like a feather. She stared at it, confused. At the bottom of the note, a signature, Adrian Cole. For a long moment she just stood there, the noise of the room fading away. She did not know if this was mockery or kindness, but her heart told her it was something in between. After work, she took the bus downtown to return the item in person. The Cole building rose like a mirror of steel and glass over the city, its logo gleaming above revolving doors. Inside, everything smelled expensive polished marble floors, minimalist design, quiet staff who looked like they belonged in a magazine. At the reception desk, she hesitated. "I'm here to see Mr. Adrian Cole," she said softly. The receptionist gave her a professional smile. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but he sent me this." She held out the letter. The woman's eyes flicked over it, and then she pressed a button on her headset. "One moment, please." Minutes later, an assistant appeared, a tall woman in a gray suit, efficient but not unkind. "Mr. Cole asked me to bring you up," she said. The elevator ride was silent except for the hum of cables. Elena's heart pounded. When the doors opened, she stepped into a vast office lined with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline. Adrian was there, behind a sleek black desk, his wheelchair turned slightly toward the view. He looked up as she entered. "You came," he said quietly. She swallowed. "I just wanted to return this. You did not have to send someone." "I know," he said, studying her face. "But I wanted to." She placed the pin on his desk. "I do not want you to think I am here for any reason other than returning it." "Then why are you nervous?" he asked. His tone was calm, almost gentle, and it unsettled her more than arrogance ever could. "I am not," she lied, her voice barely steady. He smiled faintly. "You work at Street Matthews Rehab Center, do you not? My foundation supports their art program." Her eyes widened. "How do you know that?" "I make it a point to know who makes a difference," he replied. "I saw the way you looked at me last night, not with pity, but with honesty. I respect that." He turned slightly, his wheelchair whirring softly. "My assistant told me they are looking for a new art consultant. Would you consider it?" She blinked, stunned. "Why me?" He met her gaze directly. "Because you see people as more than their wounds. I could use someone like that." For a long second Elena could not speak. The city lights reflected on the glass behind him, outlining his profile like a painting she could never finish. "I will think about it," she whispered. He nodded. "That is all I ask." As she left the office, her reflection followed her in the glass walls, small, uncertain, but somehow steadier than before. Outside, snow had begun to fall again. She looked up, exhaled, and smiled faintly to herself. For the first time in a long while, the world did not feel as cold. Days turned into a quiet rhythm after that meeting. Elena went back to her work at the rehab center, but she could not shake the memory of Adrian's steady gaze or the way his words had settled somewhere deep inside her. She had told herself it was just a polite offer, nothing more, yet his voice lingered like a melody she could not forget. 3 days later, she received a call from his assistant. "Miss Brooks, Mr. Cole wondered if you might have time to visit the foundation tomorrow. He would like to discuss the art program." Elena hesitated before saying yes. The next morning, she arrived at the Cole Foundation, a separate wing connected to his main offices. Unlike the cold perfection of his corporate floor, this place was warm and filled with color. Paintings lined the walls, some bright and hopeful, others dark and abstract. She felt small walking through it, carrying her worn sketchbook like a secret. When Adrian entered, he wore a charcoal sweater instead of a suit. The change surprised her. "You came," he said, his tone softer than before. "I wanted to see what you are building here," she replied. He nodded toward a nearby easel. "Show me something. Anything." She hesitated, then opened her sketchbook and flipped to a page filled with rough lines and shades of blue and gray. "It is not finished," she said quickly. "Neither am I," he answered quietly. Their eyes met for a long second before he gestured toward the canvas beside him. "Would you help me paint something?" he asked. "I cannot move my legs, but my hands still work, even if not the way they used to." She smiled a little. "Of course." She guided his hand, holding the brush with him as they painted slow strokes of color together. The silence between them was no longer awkward. It was peaceful. He asked about her life, and she told him bits of it: her mother's illness, the struggle to keep up with rent, the dream of one day opening a small art studio for people who could not afford therapy. "You talk about hope like it is a paint color," he said, half smiling. "Maybe it is," she replied. "You just have to mix it right." Over the next few weeks, their sessions became a routine. Twice a week, she came to the foundation to help develop a new art program for patients with physical disabilities. Sometimes they talked for hours, sometimes they said nothing at all. The sound of brushes scraping across canvas became their language. One afternoon, while adjusting a canvas, Elena caught him watching her. "What?" she asked, a little flustered. "You do not treat me like I am broken," he said simply. She froze, unsure how to respond. "You are not," she finally whispered. "You are just healing differently." He smiled at that, but there was sadness behind it. "You have no idea how many people come into my life pretending not to see the chair, yet everything they say revolves around it. You are the first person who looks me in the eyes." She looked away, pretending to mix paint. "Maybe because I know what it feels like when people stop seeing you." That night, after she left, Adrian stayed in the quiet studio long after the lights dimmed. On the canvas before him was the faint outline of her face, painted in soft strokes of gray and gold. He did not know why he was painting her, only that it felt like the first real thing he had created since the accident. Meanwhile, back in her apartment, Elena sat by the window sketching under the glow of a single lamp. Outside, the city lights flickered, and she smiled faintly as she drew a pair of hands holding a paintbrush, one steady, one trembling. In the corner, she wrote 3 words: "We are healing." Winter melted slowly into spring, and the days between Adrian and Elena began to blur into something that no longer felt like work. The art room had turned into a quiet sanctuary filled with canvases, unfinished sketches, and soft sunlight filtering through wide windows. Sometimes he painted while she read. Sometimes they argued about colors until one of them laughed first. For the first time since his accident, Adrian looked alive. His doctors noticed his improvement, the steadier control of his hands, and the return of focus in his eyes. But what no one else saw was how his mood changed whenever Elena walked into the room. She had become part of his routine, part of his healing. One afternoon she arrived to find him staring at a blank canvas. "Creative block?" she teased, setting her bag down. "No," he said after a pause. "Just thinking about how fragile everything is. Before the accident, I thought success was measured in numbers, not in moments. Now I count how many minutes I can hold a brush without trembling." She tilted her head. "That is still progress." "Maybe," he said, glancing at her. "Or maybe it is just learning to live differently." She smiled. "Either way, it is living." There was silence then, heavy but gentle, the kind of silence that says more than words. He finally spoke again, his tone quieter. "Do you ever wish your life had turned out differently?" She thought for a moment before answering. "I used to. But lately I think maybe it is supposed to hurt before it heals. Otherwise, how would we ever know what peace feels like?" He looked at her, like she had just painted something he could not stop staring at. Later that week, Adrian invited her to attend a small charity dinner hosted by the foundation. "It is not formal," he assured her, "just a gathering of donors. You have been part of this project from the start. You should be there." She almost said no, but something in his voice made her agree. The event was held at a rooftop garden overlooking the city. Lanterns hung from iron beams, and soft jazz drifted through the night air. Elena wore a simple black dress, the same one she had saved for her mother's hospital fundraiser. When Adrian saw her, his expression shifted from surprise to admiration. "You look different," he said, then smiled. "Good different." She laughed lightly. "And you look less intimidating without that suit of armor you call a blazer." He chuckled. "Do not let anyone hear you say that. It would ruin my reputation." Throughout the evening they spoke with guests, shared stories of patients from the art program, and accepted quiet compliments about how their work had inspired others. Yet underneath the laughter and music, there was something unspoken between them. When the crowd began to thin, Adrian wheeled his chair to the edge of the terrace, the city lights glittering like distant stars below. "You ever think about what happens when this ends?" he asked suddenly. "When the program finishes and you move on?" She turned to face him, startled. "Is that your way of saying you want me to leave?" He shook his head. "No, it is my way of saying I do not want you to." Her breath caught, but before she could reply, a voice interrupted. A woman in a sleek red dress approached them with a knowing smile. "Adrian, You did not tell me you hired someone new, she said smoothly. He stiffened slightly. Elena, this is Vanessa, my former business partner. Vanessa extended her hand to Elena, her eyes sharp and assessing. So you are the one keeping him busy these days. Elena forced a polite smile. Just helping with the art program. Vanessa's lips curved. How admirable. Then she leaned toward Adrian. You really should be careful. People can get attached for all the wrong reasons. The remark landed like a shard of glass. Elena stepped back, her face pale. Adrian's jaw tightened. That is enough, Vanessa, but the damage was done. As they left the terrace, neither of them spoke. The elevator doors closed with a soft chime, and Elena stared at her reflection in the mirrored wall. For the first time since meeting him, she wondered if everyone else saw her as a charity case, too. Adrian looked over, regret flickering in his eyes, but he said nothing. When the doors opened, she stepped out first into the cool night air, whispering, "Good night, Mr. Cole." He called after her, but she did not turn back. Elena did not sleep that night. The words from Vanessa echoed in her head over and over again. People can get attached for all the wrong reasons. She wanted to believe that what she felt for Adrian was real, but doubt crept in like a shadow she could not push away. The next morning, she went to the foundation as usual, but her steps were heavier. When she entered the art room, Adrian was already there, waiting. He looked tired, as if he had not slept either. You did not answer my calls, he said quietly. I needed time, she replied, setting her bag down. About what? About us, she said, her voice shaking slightly. About whether this is becoming something it should not be. He frowned. What are you afraid of, Elena? Of being another charity project, she snapped before she could stop herself. The room fell silent except for the hum of the city outside. Adrian's expression hardened. Is that what you think this is? I do not know, she said softly. You live in a world where people do things out of guilt, or pity, or responsibility. I am not sure what I mean to you anymore. He stared at her for a long moment, his jaw tightening. You mean more than you realize, he said finally, his voice low but steady. But if you think I see you as some act of kindness, then maybe I was wrong about everything. The pain in his eyes was enough to make her chest ache. She turned away, blinking back tears. Maybe we both were, she whispered before walking out. That week, she did not return to the foundation. She buried herself in extra shifts at the rehab center, but every brushstroke felt heavy, every patient's smile reminded her of what she had left behind. One evening, while cleaning up, she noticed a small box on the table near her easel. Inside was a folded letter and a photograph. It was from Adrian. The note was brief. You were right. Sometimes pity and love look the same until one of them leaves. I hope you find what you are looking for. Thank you for helping me paint again. Beneath the note was a photo of the two of them taken weeks earlier during an art session. She was laughing, and he was looking at her, unaware that anyone had captured it. Her hands trembled as she read it again. Without thinking, she grabbed her coat and left, catching the last train downtown. The Cole building loomed dark against the skyline when she arrived. Security recognized her and let her in, though they looked surprised. She rode the elevator to his floor, her heart pounding louder with each second. When the doors opened, the office lights were dim, but she saw him near the window, staring out at the city in his wheelchair. You should not be here, he said quietly without turning. I could say the same, she replied, walking closer. I got your letter. He turned to face her, his eyes unreadable. I did not want to make things harder. You did, she said, her voice breaking. Because you gave up before I did. He blinked, surprised. You walked away. Because I was scared, she admitted. Scared of being seen as weak or foolish, or someone who stayed because she felt sorry. But the truth is, I stayed because I cared. Because you made me believe that broken things can still be beautiful. His hands tightened on the wheels of his chair. Then why come back now? Because pity fades, she said, stepping closer. But love does not. For a long time, neither spoke. Then slowly he reached for her hand. You do not owe me anything, Elena. She smiled through her tears. Maybe not, but I choose to be here. The tension broke like a quiet storm. He exhaled, closing his eyes as if a weight had finally lifted. You are impossible, he murmured. So are you, she replied softly. Outside, rain began to fall against the glass. Inside, two people stood still in the silence, not as patient and caretaker, not as billionaire and artist, but simply as two souls who had finally stopped running from what was real. The rain outside turned into a steady whisper as Adrian and Elena stood in silence, their reflections trembling in the glass behind them. The air between them carried both tension and relief, the kind that comes after too much truth has finally been spoken. Adrian broke the silence first. "You should sit down," he said quietly. "You look exhausted." She shook her head, wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand. "I did not come here to sit. I came because I cannot keep pretending this does not matter." He watched her carefully, his voice low. "And what if it does?" "Then we stop running from it," she said simply. His eyes softened. He turned his chair slightly, facing her completely now. "You know, after the accident, I stopped believing in second chances. I thought the world had already decided how much I was worth. But then you showed up and ruined every rule I lived by." She smiled faintly. "Good. Maybe some rules deserve to be broken." They stayed like that for a while, just breathing the same quiet air. Finally, Adrian let out a deep sigh. "Do you want to know what really happened that night?" he asked. She frowned slightly. "What night?" "The accident," he said. "I never told anyone the whole story." She hesitated but nodded. "Then tell me." His gaze drifted toward the window, the rain blurring the city lights. "It was not an accident, at least not entirely. Someone tampered with the brakes of my car. The investigation called it mechanical failure, but I knew better. It was my business partner, Vanessa. We built coal enterprises together, but when I decided to shut down one of our unethical projects, she saw it as betrayal. I was on my way to meet the board when it happened." Elena's eyes widened. "She tried to end me? Maybe not directly," he said bitterly, "but she made sure I would not stand in her way again." "Does anyone else know?" "No. Without proof, it is just my word against hers." Elena's mind raced. She thought back to that charity dinner, the cold gleam in Vanessa's eyes, the way she had spoken with such quiet venom. It suddenly made sense. "You need to tell someone," she said firmly. "You cannot keep this to yourself." "And what would that solve?" he asked, his tone weary. "Expose her. Drag my company through the mud. Destroy everything I have rebuilt." "No, I cannot do that." "Then let me help," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "You helped me learn how to see beyond what is broken. Let me do the same for you." For a moment, he just looked at her, uncertain. Then something in his expression shifted, a flicker of trust returning to his face. "You really do not know when to give up, do you?" "Never," she said. And for the first time in months, he laughed a real, unguarded laugh that made her chest ache in the best way. Over the next few days, Elena began searching through the Foundation's financial reports and board communications, helping Adrian quietly from behind the scenes. Together they found small clues, unusual transfers, erased emails, hidden documents that pointed toward Vanessa's betrayal. Each discovery drew them closer, not just as partners in truth, but as two people finally moving towards something real. Late one evening, while sorting through files in his office, Elena found an old newspaper clipping the same one she had once seen in the rehab center, showing the wrecked car and the headline about the crash. She traced the photo with her fingers and whispered, "You survived for a reason." Adrian looked up from his desk, his eyes catching hers. "Maybe that reason was you," he said softly. She froze, unsure how to respond, but the sincerity in his voice left no room for doubt. "Do not say things like that," she murmured, blushing. "Why not?" he said. "Because I might start believing you," she whispered. He smiled gently. "Then maybe it is time you did." The rain outside began to ease, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like the storm was finally passing. The next morning, Adrian arrived at the Foundation earlier than usual. The sleepless night before had not dulled his focus. If anything, it had sharpened it. He wheeled himself into his office and found Elena already there, sorting through a stack of documents. Her hair was pulled back messily, and a cup of cold coffee sat forgotten beside her. "You have been here all night," he said softly. She looked up, startled but smiling faintly. "I could not stop. I think I found something." She handed him a printed email chain, her voice steady but urgent. "These are internal communications from the company archive. Look at the timestamps. The night before your crash, Vanessa requested an emergency meeting with the engineering team. 2 hours later, she approved a private payment to a subcontractor that does not exist." Adrian scanned the papers, his eyes narrowing. "This is the missing piece." "It is not proof yet," she cautioned. But it is close. Before he could respond, the intercom buzzed. His assistant's voice came through, tense. "Mr. Cole, Vanessa is here to see you." Adrian's hand froze on the document. He exchanged a glance with Elena, who whispered, "Let me stay." He nodded. "Send her in," he said into the speaker. Moments later, Vanessa walked in, perfectly composed, wearing a white blazer and that same practiced smile. "Adrian," she greeted smoothly, "you look well. I was surprised you wanted to see me." "Sit down," he said, his tone calm but cold. She took the chair opposite his desk, crossing her legs. Her eyes flicked briefly toward Elena, but ignored her presence. "What is this about?" she asked. Adrian placed the printed emails on the table between them. "You tell me." Vanessa's expression did not change, but the color drained slightly from her cheeks. "I see you have been digging into old files," she said. "That is a dangerous habit." "So is sabotage," he replied evenly. "You almost killed me. Do you have proof of that accusation?" she asked, her tone tightening. "I do now," he said quietly. "And so does my legal team. Every document has been duplicated and time-stamped. If anything happens to me, it all goes public." For the first time, Vanessa's mask cracked. "You would destroy your own company over this?" "I would save it from you," he said. She rose from her chair, fury flashing in her eyes. "You think anyone will believe a man who cannot even stand on his own?" That was when Elena stepped forward. "They will believe him," she said firmly. "Because he is not alone." Vanessa turned sharply, her lip curling. "And who are you, his nurse? His pity project? His partner?" Elena said without hesitation. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Vanessa scoffed, grabbed her purse, and stormed toward the door. "You will regret this, both of you," she hissed before leaving. The door slammed behind her, the sound echoing through the room. For a long moment, silence filled the space again. Then Adrian let out a breath he had been holding. "You did not have to do that," he said quietly. "I wanted to," Elena replied. "I am tired of people underestimating you." He looked at her, something unreadable in his expression. "You realize this changes everything," he said. "I know," she answered softly. "But maybe that is not a bad thing." Over the next few days, the fallout began. Vanessa's lawyer contacted the board, but the documents spoke for themselves. She was suspended pending a full investigation, and Adrian regained control of his company. Yet instead of feeling victorious, he felt something deeper, a quiet gratitude that he had not faced it alone. That evening, as the city lights flickered outside his office, Adrian found Elena standing by the window, watching the skyline. "You are free now," she said. "So are you," he replied. "You helped me remember what it means to fight for something worth keeping." She smiled softly. "And what is that?" He paused, his eyes holding hers. "You," he said simply. Elena blinked, unable to speak for a moment. The room felt smaller, warmer, like the air itself had shifted. "Adrian," she whispered, "do not say that unless you mean it." "I mean every word," he said, his voice steady. For the first time since the crash, he reached out not for balance, not for help, but for her hand. In the days that followed, the storm around Vanessa's scandal consumed the business world. But for Adrian and Elena, life grew quieter. He spent less time in meetings and more time at the foundation, rebuilding the art program with her. Reporters called, lawyers demanded statements, yet he found peace in the sound of brushes scraping softly against canvas. For the first time since his accident, he was creating again, not for profit or reputation, but for healing. One afternoon, he found Elena in the studio, standing before a half-finished painting. It was of two hands, one steady, one trembling, joined over a blank page. "You never finish anything," he teased gently. She smiled without looking at him. "Some things are not meant to be finished," she said. "They are meant to grow." He moved closer, watching her paint. The sunlight caught her hair, turning it gold. "You should show this at the new exhibit next month," he said. "The one you are hosting?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "That would be awkward." "Not if it is called The Art of Healing," he replied. She froze, the brush still in her hand. "You are serious?" "Completely," he said, smiling faintly. "It is time people saw what this place really means. Not just charity or therapy, but recovery, yours, mine, everyone's." She set down the brush and looked at him for a long moment. "You are different, Adrian." "Maybe I am finally who I was supposed to be," he said softly. The exhibit came together faster than either of them expected. Invitations went out to investors, artists, and patients from the foundation. The night of the opening, the building glowed under soft white lights. Paintings lined the walls, telling stories of struggle and renewal. In the center of the main hall hung Elena's piece, the two hands over the blank canvas now complete. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "Dedicated to those who taught me that healing is not a destination but a choice." As guests mingled and cameras flashed, Adrian stayed back, watching her move through the crowd, laughing with the patients, thanking donors, and making sure every detail was perfect. His assistant approached him quietly. "Mr. Cole, the press wants a statement." He shook his head. Later. He rolled his chair forward toward the main display. When Elena noticed him, she smiled, her eyes shining. "What do you think?" she asked. "It is perfect," he said. "But you forgot one thing." "What?" "Your name next to mine." She frowned. "This was your vision." "No," he said, looking at her intently. "It was ours." The room quieted as he moved to the small podium near the front. Cameras turned toward him, microphones lifted. He took a breath and began to speak. "A year ago, I thought my life was over. I was alive, but I was not living. I had lost my company, my health, my faith in people. Then someone walked into my life and reminded me that being broken does not mean being useless. That healing takes more courage than success ever did. This exhibit is not about art. It is about people, the ones who refuse to give up on themselves and on each other." He turned toward Elena, his voice softening. "And it is about the person who refused to give up on me." The audience applauded, but all Adrian could see was her. She blinked back tears, her hand covering her mouth. When the clapping subsided, she whispered, "You should not have said that." "I needed to," he said simply, "because this is the truth." After the speech, as the crowd dispersed, Elena found him near her painting. "You know they will print every word of that," she said. "Good," he replied. "Let them. I am done hiding." She smiled, then reached into her bag and handed him a small envelope. "What is this?" "Open it," she said. Inside was a photograph, the same one he had sent her before, but this time it had been painted over in delicate strokes. The two of them stood together, surrounded by light. Across the bottom she had written 5 words. "Do not stay out of pity." He looked up, eyes glistening. "You remembered." "How could I forget?" she said softly. "It was the first thing you ever said to me." He smiled, and for the first time since that night at the gala, his heart felt whole. The weeks after the exhibit felt like a new beginning. The scandal with Vanessa had faded into memory, and Cole Enterprises began to rebuild under Adrian's quiet but steady leadership. The foundation thrived more than ever, with new donors, new programs, and a waiting list of patients who wanted to join the art therapy classes. Every day Adrian and Elena worked side by side, but what connected them now was not duty or guilt, it was choice. One morning she found him in the art room, staring at the sunlight spilling across the canvas. "You have been here since dawn," she said softly. He smiled. "Habit, I guess. Old me used to start every day by reading stock reports. Now I start it with this." He dipped the brush into soft gold paint and looked up at her. "I have been trying to capture light," he said. "Not just what it looks like, but what it feels like." She tilted her head. "And what does it feel like?" He held her gaze for a moment. "Like you." The quiet between them said everything else. Later that afternoon, the board of the foundation held a private celebration to honor the success of the Art of Healing program. Friends, staff, and patients gathered in the courtyard surrounded by blooming cherry trees. Laughter echoed, the air filled with the smell of coffee and fresh flowers. When Elena arrived, Adrian was waiting near the fountain, dressed simply but looking at ease in a way he had not before. "You made it," he said warmly. "I would not miss it," she replied. As the ceremony began, the director of the hospital took the microphone. "There are moments when healing goes beyond medicine," she said. "Today, we honor not just the recovery of one man, but the courage that inspires others to believe again." She gestured toward Adrian, and applause filled the air. He took a breath, then wheeled himself forward to speak. "There was a time I thought my story ended the night of that crash," he said. "But maybe that was just the beginning. Healing is not about standing up again. It is about choosing to live again, even when it hurts. And I would not have learned that without her." He turned toward Elena. The crowd followed his gaze as he continued, "Elena Brooks, will you come here?" She froze, then slowly stepped forward. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. It was a silver feather pin, the same one she had returned to him months ago. "You once told me broken things can still be beautiful," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "You were right. You helped me believe in more than survival. You taught me how to live. So if you are still willing to stay, not out of pity, but because you choose to, I want you by my side, not as my caretaker, as my partner for life." For a second, there was only silence. Then Elena laughed through her tears. "You are unbelievable," she whispered. "Is that a yes?" he asked softly. She nodded, smiling through the trembling. It has always been yes. The courtyard erupted in applause, but neither of them heard it. Adrian reached for her hand, and she knelt beside him, resting her forehead against his. Around them, the cherry blossoms drifted down like confetti, painting the air with pink and white. Weeks later, a small wedding was held in the same garden. No press, no grand speeches, just close friends and a simple promise. Elena wore a soft ivory dress, and Adrian had chosen to walk not perfectly, not without effort, but on his own 2 feet, every step a miracle of will. When he reached her, she was crying, smiling, and whispering, "I told you we would both heal." He slipped the silver feather pin onto her dress. "And we did," he said. The guests cheered, but for them, the world had already gone quiet. The story that began with pity ended with strength, love, and the quiet truth that healing is not about what you lose, it is about who walks with you through it. And as they turned toward the sunset together, it was clear that neither of them would ever walk alone again.